Okay. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Sarah. And on behalf of Vuurtoren and VRT Innovation, I would like to welcome you to this session on AI. And you might wonder, what the hell, why is she talking in English? Because she speaks Dutch. But we have some international guests here, so we'll do it completely in English today. These guests are coming from our international network of VRT Innovation, Future Media Hubs. This is where we get together public service media and commercial media to exchange and collaborate on innovative and strategic projects. And if you want to know more about it or what it means to you, how you can use it, then feel free to come and talk to us or scan the two QR codes that you will see on the screen after the panel. But obviously first, I would like to invite Kim Achtergalen and her guests. Kim is part of our team and she will host this session. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll put this back. Hello, everyone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues, of course. Today, as you all know, we're going to discuss the panel discussion, and here we're going to try to unravel the mysteries, explore possibilities, and unveil, hopefully, the future of artificial intelligence in our very own media landscape. Because in this world where news travels at the speed of a tweet and content creation is constantly evolving, it is very important as a media organization that we try to stay at the forefront of innovation, because AI has emerged with an incredible force and also an incredible speed. For some, it has even already become an indispensable ally, enhancing our capabilities and amplifying our creative potential like never before. So, let's introduce our trio of extraordinary international speakers who will enlighten, inspire, and leave us marveling at the wonders of AI. Join me in giving a warm round of applause for Marie Kilg, David Caswell, and Max Tiel. Welcome. Yeah. You can choose whenever. Yeah, of course. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so Marie, I want to start with you. You're closest. That's easy.
Good morning.
Okay, you've been involved in AI-related projects, of course, including Anik T. Way. Am I pronouncing it right? Okay, the Columnist project, where you worked, and also Amazon on the Alexa team. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your work there?
Sure, yeah. So Annick Tiwei is, I believe, the first columnist in at least German-speaking media who is not human. It was kind of a project at the intersection of art and journalism and technology. And we started working on this last summer and finally launched the first columns in print newspaper. It's Taz in Berlin. A week before ChatGPT was launched, so in November. So I don't know if it's good or bad, actually, because kind of ChatGPT stole the show a little bit for Annick. But on the other hand, like, it's been amazing to have a monthly column where we can kind of showcase generative AI and the developments every month. And thanks to ChatGPT, things have changed pretty quickly. Yeah, and before I joined Amazon, I was already a journalist. I've always been interested in technology. I started working with AI, or neural networks, generative AI, in 2017.
Early.
Yeah, and I trained my own neural networks that outputted really, really bad text. And back then I was super sure that was never going to be like a real competition to human writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was wrong, and now I'm doing more projects on AI. I learned a lot at Amazon as a project manager for Alexa, designing the personality and also learning about the kind of like the other side of AI, natural language technologies like the text-to-speech and natural language understanding. But yeah, I missed journalism, so I came back, and now I'm trying to do innovative projects, mostly for DW, Deutsche Welle in Berlin.
Okay, interesting. And David, you've worked extensively in implementing machine learning at big organizations like Yahoo. You worked with BBC. Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on your experience managing AI in a large media organization like VRT?
Yeah, I think the whole kind of development, at least in my career, and I've kind of seen, I've been around in this area long enough that I've kind of seen the phases kind of come and go since deep learning and the first generation of machine learning came along in 2009, 2010. And I think it's changed dramatically, with this in this last year with the Chat GPT moment. Prior to that, there was a much more, and this I think is true not just at the BBC but also Tribune where I worked before and at Yahoo, a much more kind of task specific, kind of functional, kind of cost benefit kind of a rationale for projects, which made a lot of sense in that era. But I think what's happened with the tone, I guess, in this last period, is that there's this different perspective, this kind of awareness that there's going to be large, broad, generalized changes, and it's not so much anymore about we're going to build a tool that's going to solve a task and another tool to solve another task. It's about we've got this whole class of functionality that we don't even know what it's capable of yet. And the only thing we're sure of is that there's going to be great uncertainty, and so people are gearing up for that. Excuse me, that very different kind of reinvention or transformation, rather than task, tool to a task. And it's roughly, I think, it parallels this difference between narrow AI and general AI, whereas the conversations I think before were roughly, assuming, I think correctly at the time, narrow AI, task, a tool for a task, whereas now there's this sort of different tone around general kind of AI as a utility almost.
Yeah, we're gonna dive deeper in that just a little bit. And then we have Max. Max, you also have a unique perspective because you are both a part-time worker at Sound and Vision, and you are the founder of Thunderboom Records. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your project Wave and Open Culture Tech there?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I need to start by telling what Thunderboom Records is. We claim to be the world's first record label for robots. Started when COVID hit in because we had way too much time on our hands. Actually, it's not a classical record label. It is a non-profit dedicated to helping artists with new technology and especially AI technology. So we investigate and create AI technology for artists to see how they can explore the creative potential of these technologies. Wave and Open Culture Tech are two of the projects that we do. This is all funded by the Dutch government, and in collaboration with Sound and Vision, where I also work, so that's a nice coincidence. Wave is an AI DJ system that works with heritage materials, so audio archives at Sound and Vision. So it's a use of public materials that we try to give back to people on the dance floor. And Open Culture Tech is a project where we create low-key tools for artists, so really applied AI, AR, and avatar tools that they can use live on stage to enhance their stage experience, to say like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, also interesting. Now that we've kind of had an introduction of the three of you, it's time to delve a little bit more deeper into the discussion, because we'll be exploring how we at VRT can effectively use AI as a tool in this big media organization as well. So David, to come back to what you said, how would you advise a company like VRT to start with the process of implementing AI? How do you change that sort of fixed mindset, I think? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just, using my time at the BBC, I don't, I think there's an assumption that there is sort of this sort of fixed mindset and people are stuck in their ways and reluctant to change and all the rest of it. And there definitely, obviously, is some of that in kind of large, public organizations. But there's also an awful lot of people that are flexible and eager for change and are willing to try new things and so on. And I certainly seen that at the BBC. A lot of the work we've done, for example, around automated journalism, going from essentially initial concept to using these tools in, for reporting full results in a general election across the country, which is kind of some of the most important editorial tasks the BBC does. That was like a 9-month process. I mean, I couldn't ask a startup to do any faster than that. So it's not I don't think it's a one size fits all. Like it's not, yes, there are cultural challenges, but there's also kind of cultural opportunities in these organizations too. And then even, again, from the BBC, a lot of the existing stuff that these organizations do transfers, I think, actually quite well into some idea of what an AI-mediated future might be. So, for example, just the fact that these organizations, typically the BBC certainly this way, deal with audio and text and video and sort of integrated media of different kinds. That's not something that a lot of media organizations have. Most media organizations are kind of they just do one form of media. They don't have this sort of breadth of both mediums and topics and coverage and entertainment and news, and there's sort of a diversity that I think gives a little more insight into what cross media opportunities are. And then projects specifically at the BBC, in our innovation work through News Labs and our R&D department, a lot of those projects, although they didn't use generative AI, they did similar objectives, or they pursued similar objectives using kind of deterministic or structured or kind of rules-based ways, not using generative AI. But they produce roughly the same kind of future-facing product or experiences that AI makes much easier. So in a way, I think a lot of organizations have already tried these innovation approaches and tested them with audiences, but maybe found them difficult to implement in sort of business as usual kind of routine production, because the editorial challenges were too great. I mean, I think with dialogue systems, chat systems, that's a good example, because before you had to set up these big dialogue trees and program it what to say when it was asked for a certain thing, and now you don't need to do that. It's a much easier task now. I think the same is true with tagging systems, with topic recognition systems, with reversioning and reformatting, turning text into graphical stories, moving text and video across languages. All of these things were possible before, but really difficult, and now they're much, much easier. So I think there's a lot of history in innovation in these organizations, plus a lot of actual, cultural suitability to grasp some of these opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Marie, I see you nodding as well. You agree?
Yeah, I'm
Thank
I'm
you.
just generally pretty happy to see with all the people in media that I'm speaking to this year that there's I think a lot of openness and awareness that this is something interesting that we should look at. Like, definitely there's risks, and definitely you want to be really careful and not just rush ahead and implement something just for the sake of innovation. But I feel, compared to other times I've seen in media and also other technologies, I feel that like a lot of people in media right now are very like open and aware that they want to do something
Okay.
innovative, and that they shouldn't like cling to the past and just to try and ignore AI and hope it goes away and doesn't take our jobs.
Correct. And structure-wise, does any one of you maybe think, how should we start there? How should we start structure-wise in a media company as VRT?
I think with AI, it's probably a good idea to start working backwards, because it's such a, like, there's so many tools. AI, also, like, we say AI, but of course it's not one thing, right? Like, there's a whole spectrum of automation and now generative AI. So I think apart from like doing quirky projects like the columnist that my team did just to try something out, if you really want to apply it as an organization, it's probably a good idea to speak really closely with the editorial teams. Of course, have experts in-house who can like really understand the technology and have ideas and also teach people about the risks. But then think about like, what do you really want to do in team X? Like, for example, maybe some team is too small. They would love to do more local stories, but they haven't been able to because of low resources. Maybe AI can help with that because it can help you scale. So kind of like think backwards from what it actually is that you want to achieve, and then use AI as a tool to get there, rather than just saying, okay, I want to use AI and maybe let's throw this at the audience.
Yeah, okay. And then maybe for you, Max, because you're also very into content as well with the music of Thunderboom Records, what kind of emerging trends or advancements in AI are something, or do you foresee as having a very large impact on this media industry today?
Well, if we talk in terms of content, I think there's, well, I mean, we have a lot of opportunities now to analyze a lot of data. So For instance, an example that we have at Sound and Vision that I find very interesting is audio matching. See how certain audio fragments in the news have transferred all across different media platforms. So you can see how news has spread. For instance, around COVID, we had an experiment with a public speech by the Minister of Health who was talking about COVID, and we saw that that part was used in a lot of different TV formats, social media. So it's really good to see how different platforms put the same piece of video in a different context. So, but also in terms of generating formats, generating content, of course. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I don't even know where to start by giving an example. Also, creating music, for instance, that could be used in different mediums. We use heritage materials, for instance, which I find a very fascinating source because it is already in the media archive. So we recycle actually old news and bring it back to the news from nowadays. Reusing these heritage materials can help you telling new stories with old materials. I'm a historian by background, so that's what I like. I mean, a lot of possibilities. I can imagine that you have to feel like, where do we start? I would always say start with an experiment, just a small experiment. You don't even need to know where it's going. Like Wave was a silly experiment, try to create music with non-musical heritage material, and now it becomes a tool for telling stories with historical material. So you don't always foresee where you will end up with using AI, because in the process you learn so much new cross sections. Yeah.
Yeah, Wave, the project that you just mentioned, you brought a video of that as well. Is that correct? Or
Yeah. I don't think it explains a whole lot, because you asked me to bring a video and I don't have a lot of videos of our work, to be honest. So it looks more like a festival after movie, but it shows a little bit of the joy that you can also have by using AI.
Okay.
Not sure if you want
Maybe
to
we can
look at it
check
now.
that. Oh, wait. It's a little bit badly placed here, but we'll make it work. Okay, this one.
Yeah, I can talk over it. So that's the AI DJ system Wave. That's Aran, one of the programmers. Here we created a silent disco where people could create their own music with the heritage materials and also listen to each other's music. The lightnings are also AI generated. I think the input were also heritage materials. We had visuals. That's also a component. We used archive materials of old Dutch television to create new visuals. I hope you will be able to see that somewhere in this video. And the lightnings were or we used the video materials to also create the lightnings. We had DJs play around with the system, and now we're exploring the metadata so that we can actually tell stories. For instance, you have a sound archive around a certain event. I like a sound archive that we now have with city sounds during COVID, so it's really not a lot of noise, but and you can use that to tell the story, for instance, of COVID in a song, and that you can use again in a TV format.
Okay, wow. So you've learned from that project, I'm assuming. Are there any key takeaways that you want to mention?
Yeah, that's. I'm not sure if that's very much media related, but it's more in terms of creative expression. We really liked how this generative system, because in the end it is a generative music system, created live musical input that artists had to work with. So the DJ got output out of the system, but didn't know what to get. So we really, as a DJ, you really have to be a good DJ, very musical. You have to have a lot of musical abilities to work with that. So the system maybe gives you a beat or a sample that sounds terrible. Like, hey, how do you go with that? You know, how do you make that work in your music when you're playing live? It brought new ideas that they couldn't have imagined before starting the show, and that's what I like very much. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Also, with your project, are there any things you've learned from working with Annick Wei?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the parallel that I see here is really that it's like a form of collaboration, right? It's not that you just give your work to the machine and then let it do something, and it's not the other way around either. But it's a constant back and forth. And yeah, we say AI is a tool, but it's actually a bit more than that, just because it really like challenges your creativity. And so it's actually the same with Way. So we press a button and we get a text, but then of course the first text is like really not good. So we change the parameters and we prompt back and forth and we figure out like, maybe we're asking the wrong way. What do we want the text to be about? And so I think even like apart from this project, thinking into the future about how humans will use AI help to write, it's going to be mostly about that, just like using it as a sparrings partner to maybe bounce ideas, to maybe let it write a first draft of an email that you really don't want to write. Maybe not write a first draft of a text you're really passionate about because you don't want to limit your ideas. But then once you have like your first ideas, give them to the AI and see if ChatGPT or whatever system can add something, can inspire you. It's just it's like a very powerful thesaurus. I've heard someone say like it's just really really good with words, and you can use that.
Okay, David?
Just I think what that I agree 100%, and I think what that brings up is like a possible change in how innovation works in large media organizations, and I think like one of the things that these tools do is they make innovation much easier for kind of individuals or maybe one or two people to do, and a lot of the things that I've done in the BBC in News Labs, for example, you had a team, you had engineers, you had a designer, you had all of these people, you had some editorial people. And I think these tools make it make a lot of that maybe unnecessary, in that you can have one or two people with some creativity and some energy and some excitement and curiosity can just use the tools. And I we'll see how it plays out. But I think what that opens up is the possibility of innovation in media organizations becoming less of a technical or an organizational function and more of an individual editorial function, so that individual editorial people can just use the tools and try what works and use natural language processing, natural language generation, natural language understanding, text to image, text to video, things like SoundDraw, these big music systems, all of these tools, just sort of use them like any other editorial tool, mix and create and try things out and all the rest of it, which would be a change in how innovation, I think, is managed in a lot of organizations.
Yes, and maybe to add to that, it goes not just for innovation, right, in the sense of like really doing something that we haven't done before, but also just like any team or any individual at the media company can feel empowered to like really think about what do they want to bring to listeners, to users, because the tools can make you so much more effective, and you need in many cases fewer resources to do something. So maybe if you've been sad in the past years because you like had some idea that you were passionate about but you couldn't get funding for it, or you would have needed a team of like 2 or 3 people but you didn't have that team, maybe think about it again, because maybe now you don't need so many people anymore to implement the same thing.
I hope I can add to that as well. It also really helps, like if we're talking in terms of research, helps with blind spots in your own view. If you're a journalist or a researcher, having to contextualize certain topics, AI can help a lot by analyzing all kinds of data that you were not able to do yourself. So, like you were saying, you can do the work of 3 people by yourself, and it doesn't mean, of course, that the other 2 will be replaced. I mean, you can just do way more and way more in-depth research on a certain topic and have way more different angles on that topic, which should provide you more nuance in your work, in your research. So also it provides new ways of searching through data that you have. It provides new ways of searching an archive, for instance. If you need context on a certain topic, pandemics, for instance, historic pandemics, to contextualize a part on COVID, this can help a lot by finding new angles. For instance, an angle of a normal citizen instead of just the upper class from, I don't know, the Spanish flu times or something like that. So it can provide so much new insights for us that we might not see because we don't have the time or the knowledge to search through such databases. Yeah.
Yeah, you said it was mainly then an individual start, that it happens. You use the tools yourself, but then how would you go about with ethical considerations within a large media company? What if everyone starts using it themselves and not?
Yeah, I think that's where the role of the organization and the processes and the brand and the values comes in, and I think it's a interesting combination, like a empowered creative individual or set of teams combined with sort of the stability and sort of the certainty and the trust, frankly, of these sort of large organizations. A lot of that is in things like translating those into policy frameworks and being able to make those real and actionable and enforceable kind of in the world, and developing those frameworks. But it also kind of goes into kind of workflow management, even the infrastructure. How creating content with these tools is just kind of one step. If you want to actually use that in kind of routine day-to-day news or entertainment, then the infrastructure to support that is important too, and that's a little less exciting, and that's not something that individuals do. That's a big and policy. I think policy frameworks are part of infrastructure as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of these things that kind of protect the public or kind of use the social and cultural and trust capital that a big media organization have, and maintain that and kind of look after that, while also taking advantage of all of this creativity and kind of new possibilities. That's kind of, to me, the beautiful pairing of how the old and the new, or sort of the bureaucracy and the innovation, can kind of work together to get the best out of both.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that you emphasize trust, because obviously at Deutsche Welle, it's also a super large discussion at the moment when we think about how we want to use generative AI, and to just like what fits together with our brand and what doesn't. But also internally, I think it's really important, like also in this conversation, to acknowledge the fears, and that yes, it will make us more productive, but you really need trust and security from your organization to not be afraid to use those tools, and to not be afraid that, okay, we're more efficient now, great, so like we'll cut the team to half the size. And I really understand those fears. So
I do think that we have, as users, also have a responsibility, not just look at institutes or legislation, but also if I use ChatGPT, I think it's important to be aware of the flaws that it has, for instance, in terms of bias. A lot of data within the system is very male-oriented. That's one example. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, it is a problem, of course, if an algorithm is very much biased. Everything is biased in the end. We are also very much biased, but I think it's very important to be aware of that. And if you know it, then you can work with the system in a way that can really helps you get new insights. If you're always aware that the system provides you more male-oriented output than female-oriented, for instance, you need to work around that. That doesn't necessarily say that you shouldn't be using the system. I mean, it can help you very much, but be aware of those biases. I think it would help a lot if we all did a little bit of investigation before we start using a system like that in all our work, to make sure that we don't get a narrowed vision altogether by using that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when looking at success stories of using AI in media companies, what are a few that you guys think that VRT really should see?
I can start with Deutsche Welle's in-house tool that we developed. I was not a part of the team, but a team at Deutsche Welle developed over the past years. It's called PlainX, and it's used for translation and adaptation. Again, it comes down to like what your media company needs, like what are the problems you're trying to find solutions for. But at Deutsche Welle, we have content in over 30 different languages. And often for some of the languages, the teams are really, really small, and they just adapt the content from other editorial departments. So they used to spend a large part of their time just finding videos in other languages, translating them, doing manual transcription, subtitling, and we now have an AI tool that helps with that, that builds like a really good framework for the human and the machine to work together, so that we can ensure that like the final output is always trusted. There was always a human working very closely with that, so we don't have just like random AI mistakes in that.
Important as well.
Yeah, but I think the teams are very happy working with that. Nobody lost their jobs, because like it's still very much a human-machine collaboration. but it makes adaptation, subtitling much easier. And we have all the different forms of media in there too. So we have text to speech, so you can even have like audio voiceover generated in your language without having to like put somebody in a studio for every little video that you do. And we have automated subtitling, transcription, and all the different translations from language to language, but also from a type of medium to another type of medium.
Yeah. And for BBC?
Uh, there's a range. I think again, one of the more boring kind of success stories are just these tools that journalists use day to day that dramatically improve how fast and how easy they can do things. So things, and I'm sure VRT uses these as well. Things like machine translation, machine transcription, automated tagging. These kind of day to day tools that just kind of take the chores away from a lot of work. So there's a lot of successes there. They're very small and like they're not visible because they're not that exciting, but they're very important. More visibly, we've had success with localization tools. So this automated journalism tool that I talked about, for example, the localization of automated stories about individual jurisdictions during elections. There are 650 parliamentary constituencies in the UK. In a normal election, there's only about 50 of those get stories because they have celebrity members of parliament or there's something special going on. But with automation, we can produce a full story for every single one of those. And we can do those in national languages like Welsh, for example, as well as in English. And so that kind of localization is another one we've done recently with synthetic voice and natural language generation for weather at a very local level. So we can produce thousands and thousands and thousands of these little local weather reports and have those updated every few hours so that like on our sounds and on our weather apps, you've got this kind of audio weather report, and that just would not even be remotely feasible other than through AI. And then there's a third category, I think, which is important and going to get more important. It's kind of more a set of tools that have been tested with audiences and have infrastructure challenges to roll out. And these are tools that essentially reversion or reformat journalism to make it more accessible to non-traditional audiences. And so this is things like making text simpler or turning text stories into graphical stories or using kind of image based interpretations of stories, summaries, all of these kind of things that move our journalism beyond 600 or 800 words of text, which a lot of it is, into ways that these portions of the audience that just are not going to read 600 words or 800 words of text, and especially that kind of complex detailed text that we're very known for. It gives alternatives that are more accessible, and so again, that would be a class of applications that are not really feasible to do manually, but become much easier. And these are things I was speaking earlier about how a lot of these the concepts are very familiar because they've been done with these rule-based systems in the past, but they were not feasible to do editorially. But now chatbots and various uses of chatbots for tutoring and children's or a lot of these kind of things this would not have been possible to do manually at scale, but are now much easier. So I think those would be three categories. I think there's a few others as well.
Yeah, sounds like good success there. And Max, for you as
Yeah,
well?
I'm nodding all the time here because I hear a few things that Sound Vision is also working on. So I'm thinking we should talk about sharing all that knowledge because I think we're all working on the same stuff. Maybe we should automate that in some way. But I think what I can add to that. So one thing that I am currently working on as part of a project for Sound Vision is framing analysis to see if we can use, for instance, large language models like ChatGPT to detect a certain frame or a certain angle in news messages. For instance, a framing that is very much politically oriented. Is there a way that we can use ChatGPT to recognize those frames? So if we give that system a database of news media to see, hey, what type of angles are more present than other angles in news media, what should we do about that? So that's a very valuable research, I think. Also, for instance, things like deep fake detection, which is very important. So how do we make sure that we don't fill up our archives or our news with fake, fake news, fake images? I think those things are very important to see. How can we make sure that we keep on spreading news that is actually true and that is not made up by somebody or generated? Yeah.
And how do you then manage those deep fakes and fake news? Because that's emerging as well. We've talked about the success now the pitfalls. What's there to look out for?
Well, I think you touch upon a very important thing. We are all getting flushed by all kinds of media, and at this moment, I think I'm most of the time still able to see whether images are generated or not. Like the Mid Journey, they're all very perfect and they're still recognizable. But I mean, in a few months, it's going to be harder. So it's very important that we stay critical on what we hear and see, and that we also look out like, hey, what type of media organizations can I trust? But I mean, that's the problem of the media organization. How do I stay trustworthy? So I think that is something that we should really watch out for. Also, I mentioned this earlier, is biases. So how do we make sure that we stay aware of smaller groups within the news? Like you say, it's also an opportunity to see if we can create more personalized content also for smaller, less represented groups. But how do we make sure that an algorithm doesn't push us in a certain direction and create a blind spot on its turn? So yeah, I think that's one of the, well, wouldn't call it a danger, but a thing to look out for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think trust is becoming even more important. Like, it has obviously been important to us in media, but now with these new tools and also just with the speed that has become much greater of like how technology changes, it's really important to think about like, how can we maintain the trust in our news brand? Like, what do we need to do in order for people to be able to trust us and come to us? And then in terms of identifying fakes and creating fakes, I think it's always an arms race. The tools will help bad actors create fake news, and the tools can also help us verify. And the Deutsche Welle is also working on digital forensics tools that you can then use to try and identify if material that you have is real, both as a media professional but also for the audience. But of course, like, as our tools get better, also the bad actors' tools get better. So
Yeah.
it will remain that way for a while. And yeah, all you can do is really like build trust and help educate people. Like media literacy is also something that I think is becoming more and more important. And I hope that the AI hype right now can actually help focus on that, because it would be a solution to many issues that we've been facing in past years. But maybe now with some added momentum, we can really push for more media literacy in schools, but also in adult education.
And for that trust, you're talking a lot about trust. How do you start with gaining that trust? You talked about education, but are there other things you're thinking about tackling?
Trust is a hard one, and at least for the BBC, it's not so much about. I mean, it is gaining the trust, but it's about preventing the erosion of the trust, because we start from a very good position in terms of trust. We're the most trusted news brand in the United States, for example, and as well as in the UK. And I think this is broadly common with public service media. That trust is high, but it's sort of slowly declining over time. And it's a complicated challenge. The people that study this, the Reuters Institute, for example, in Oxford, have a trust project, and there's other programs. It's not a simple. It's not a simple challenge. Trust decay is not just happening in media. People are not exactly trusting politicians as much as they used to. They don't trust the church. They don't trust corporations. There's a societal thing happening with trust. So I think that's the context that we're in. In terms of can you trust a specific piece of media, a photograph or a factual claim or something like that? I think that's the foundation that public service media is on. Like, if you kind of lose that, then that's existentially serious. So protecting that degree of trust is critical. We have this thing that we hear in audience surveys all the time at the BBC, that people don't really believe something until they see it on the BBC. And so, I mean, this, when the Queen died, that was it. It was like, there was all these rumors for the hours beforehand, but it's the BBC that is the definitive thing. If the BBC report it, then it's true. And so maintaining that, and then how to do that in this emerging environment. There's questions there. We have a project, for example, that's focused on essentially watermarking. It's called Project Origin, in association with some other news organizations. It's about kind of tracking the provenance of a piece of media, so that you can kind of verify all the way through. There's a similar project. It's actually related at Adobe, where they're trying to kind of build essentially encryption level watermarking into the cameras themselves, or into these high-end cameras, so that you can actually track the provenance and whether an image has been altered or not. You can track that from literally when it's taken in the camera, when this encrypted watermark is put on, all the way through to production. So some of those early days with those, but there's opportunities there for photojournalism, things where it really matters. But then there's this problem, I think, that a lot of these challenges, they might be, we might be looking at the wrong problems. The whole deep fake thing. It hasn't really been an issue yet. I mean, we've been talking about it for 4 or 5 years. And there's not a lot of examples where it's actually been a meaningful problem. There's lots of examples where, look, here's a fake thing, but it's mostly people pointing out that it's fake as to why these things go viral, not the Donald Trump being arrested or the bombing of the Pentagon thing, or they don't seem to be people don't seem to be taken in by it, And the early research that's showing up, academic research is also in that line. It's that people are not. These are not having an influence. They're not fooling people. So I think it's still kind of early days as to how this is going to play out. Yeah.
I do think what is very important for a media organization is to be transparent about where do you get your news from, how do you analyze it, how do you process it, how do you bring it to the people. So be as transparent as possible. I think that's for all organizations that work with AI very much important. And also what you see happening a lot is that organizations stick to their old values. So they bring the news in the way that they know, in the way they know, and also in the way they think that it will be trustworthy. So stick to old ways of creating news and digesting news. And I think that's a mistake, because the world around is changing. And I think it is also important to show that you are working on implementing new technologies within your workflow, but be clear about how you do that, and also be clear about what you cannot do yet. I mean, that's also not a problem. Say like, hey, this is where we use AI, and this is where we use our human reporters. So, and this is where we are helped with that. So transparency and also adaptation is very important, I think, in that sense.
Yeah, we can keep on going, but of course, maybe it's also good to hear from the audience. Are there a few questions already? Feel free to raise your hand. There? Yeah? Is there a mic we can maybe bring?
That's okay, I think.
Wait, there's a colleague running there. Yeah, that's good.
Hi, I'm Els. I work at Formats and Development, so a subject that's also within EBU. We discussed yesterday to create a session as you are doing here, so thank you. Just wondering, because we're talking within news and trustworthy PBS environment, how do you look at the other partners formatting in commercial environment? How do you think it will evolve? When will John the Mall come with the next avatar? That's a really good AI version, and how the world will look at the voice at a certain point. So just curious about your opinion.
Yeah, some of the surprises, there were so many surprises that have shown up in the last year, and I think will show up in the next year. One of the surprises for me is how much a certain kind of commercial news organization has kind of just jumped in to actually fully generate articles using these tools. And so these are typically not always, but typically kind of advertising funded, reach based, kind of broad audience based, kind of soft news kind of organizations. CNET is the one that was famous for its big fiasco that it had, but there's many others. That's really dangerous. Like looking at this over the last couple of years, the way I thought it was going to play out is that the early adopters would be using these things for just very narrow language-based tasks like summarization. There were some early examples of that. The Wall Street Journal was an early example of that. Very careful, for example, text to language or data to text generation. These kind of very controlled, very managed processes. But that's not what's happened. What's happened is that we've had all these kind of soft news reach-based organizations kind of, we're going to do articles, full on. So I don't know. I mean, I think you carry that on a year or two, and you could have kind of diverging media environments, and that I think is an opportunity for not just public service news, but for serious news, sort of the big subscription serious news organizations, because the trust in the so again, lots of surprises to come, but the possibility of having that kind of divergence, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It might be good for the news organizations, but if you have you have a lot of kind of noise in the environment, that's not good. If you have the sort of the media environment where a lot of the sort of less privileged people in society are getting their news is more suspect, that's not good. A lot of the high-end news goes behind paywalls, that's not good. But for public service media, maybe that's the niche, high-end trusted news that's available to everybody. Maybe that's, and also, using the tools to make it truly accessible to everybody, to make the language easier to understand, make it graphical, all these things. So.
Any other questions from the audience?
We've told everything.
Yeah,
Come on,
I'm guessing
everything.
you
There's got to be
have.
one question. Come on, there's so many people. There we go.
How about a pause for 6 months, as suggested by Musk and Tiel?
I have an even better proposition, which is a pause in even talking about AI for 6 months. I would welcome that. I don't think it's feasible. I think that these models are actually fairly easy to train. They're not trivial to train, and there is a lot of expense in the computational costs and all that to do that. But there's open source versions. There's lots of different ones popping up. I don't think this is something that is easy to just sort of contain. Regulation at the point of use, as it were, which I think is where the EU AI Act is kind of going. Kind of categorizing in these risk categories and so on. Makes a lot of sense, but in terms of sort of the actual core technology, it's out of the bag. I think where a lot of the kind of AI taking over the world or kind of existential threat to humanity kind of questions go. I think they're talking about these very, very large models and not the sort of the broader use of AI. But I think a lot of the risk that we'll all be dealing with in media is that it's not the robots taking over the world. It's a dysfunctional information environment. It's trust decay because of mistakes made in implementing AI. These kind of things I think are more kind of tangible. So yeah, I don't think the pause is. I don't think that's a serious. I wish, but I don't think it's a serious possibility.
Maybe a bit cynical, but even if we would be able to do such a thing and give legislators half a year extra time to create new rules, I mean, we will have the same problem a year later, right? Because the technological progression is going so exponentially quick. I mean, you cannot keep up with that in creating legislation, because every time you even think about a new law or a rule, there's already a new technology that's questioning it. So what helped me personally a lot is just accepting that this technological progression is there. We're not going to stop it in whatever way. Well, maybe a solar flame or something, I don't know. But just accept that it is there and look for yourself. Hey, how can I benefit from this, and what does it to me personally and my own context, to keep it a little bit smaller. But it didn't help me fighting it, because I got very nihilistic and punk, and I was like, okay, let's declare everything dead. But it just doesn't help. It's not. Yeah.
And on that, I'm actually kind of comforted by how governments globally reacted to COVID, because if this had happened before COVID, there'd be all this question about, well, can governments react quickly to massive, fast changing problems? And I think, yeah, governments can. Like, I could see a situation as if some very, very serious problem developed from AI, I could see governments reacting in a month, in 2 weeks, kind of a thing, because that's kind of what happened during COVID. Yeah, I think there's precedent, So.
I just want to say, I also think that some of the fear mongering hype is just obviously because some people benefit from this hype. And like we obviously also benefit from this hype, so can have to be careful. But I really think we shouldn't feel like fear of missing out and all these Twitter threads like, oh, you're falling behind if you're not using these 5 new tools. Most of that is stupid and not true. And like many of the fears around AI, you actually can just, if you sit down on a Saturday or Friday afternoon and just start reading a little bit, start playing with some tools, then a lot of that will get better and you won't be afraid anymore, I'm pretty sure.
That's a good takeaway. Maybe a final question then. What's a key takeaway you guys want to give to the audience or to VRT for managing AI and working with AI?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to repeat myself, but be transparent about what you do. I think that's one value that I live by in my own work, but try to be as transparent as possible, especially if you're a media organization.
I'm going to say my advice would be to engage. Everybody here should be paying the $20 a month to get the GPT-4 access. Playing with Midjourney, it's easy, it's fun. It really is like a Saturday afternoon kind of thing. It'll take away all of the mystery and all that. You'll kind of be sparked. I think just sort of not listening to the noise about it and just sort of getting on the tools and doing things, planning picnics with it, or looking for a little bit of advice in this, or rewriting things, or whatever it happens to be. Engagement, I think, is critical. So my advice would be engage.
Totally agree. And maybe one thing I'd add is think about the audience and then work backwards from that. Like, what is something that you've been wanting to do? What do you think your audience maybe needs from you that you haven't been doing enough of? And then think about if AI can help. And sometimes AI cannot help. And then you don't have to work with AI every day.
I'm hearing that there's one more question from the audience. Yeah. I'm thinking about the audience here, so
Taking it away.
yeah. Keeping ahead of the AI right now.
It's maybe a slightly complicated question. Is there a risk for society to have to have this being an antisocial development, because we already see that good tools are getting behind paywalls, and we already spoke about media illiteracy. We already see that now the world is becoming difficult for certain people to follow how the world develops technology-wise. Maybe people will run behind, certain groups with certain education will run behind, and they will even run behind more because they will not be able to use these tools. They will be not educated how to use these tools. The good tools will maybe will be only accessible or available to people paying a lot of money. Is there anything being done to protect this? Because I can imagine that maybe in 15 years we're going to see that people actually, a certain group of people, technology educated people will be using these tools very effectively, but it will be pushing inequality, because a big group on this planet will not be able to use these tools, or they won't be available, or maybe even worse, maybe malicious AI tools will be available, and they won't know it because they are not educated the way we are. Is there anything being done, or is there anything you guys think we should do, or government should do, or maybe we as a VRT should do, or BBC should do, to get everyone on that boat, to educate people in how to use these tools? It's a very broad.
I think education is a is a big one, but in terms of things being done, this is kind of a fun fact. The largest universal basic income experiment on the planet is being funded and conducted by OpenAI. So they from the very beginning kind of had this view of the structural risks, and those largely focused around inequality on a massive scale. Individuals, starting multi-billion-dollar companies just as individuals with zero staff. These kind of things. On the other hand, people that are just sort of being kind of managed 24/7 by machines in various ways through entertainment and other tools. And so that was this sort of horrendous vision they saw, and they have all these programs that they do. The universal basic income one is a big one. So there is some thinking going on about it, but I think this is exactly where kind of regulation and public service, through kind of what I tend to call techno-media education. It's not just media literacy anymore. It's a little more than that. Comes in. So I think there's a lot of room there. But I also have a little bit of faith in people. Like, we're all humans. We're all going to stay humans. We don't have to be on our phones all the time. We don't have to be plugged into the AI all the time. We like getting together and chatting and all the rest of it. And I think people adapt and are good at adapting. So I've kind of got a little more faith, I think, that people will figure it out over time. It's the transition that I think is the problem, as it's been with social media.
Yeah, in relation to that, there's always two sides to the story, right? Or, well, way more, but largely. So the good point is that it has the possibilities, like new technologies have the possibilities to give everybody the same chances, because we all can work with the same tools, with the same ideas. But if we look at the past, that's usually not what happens. So I think you have to be Jesus to really answer this question in a correct way. But yeah, there's of course a huge risk that it will only drive a bigger difference in incomes, and like you say, have a even smaller group deciding what happens and what does not happen. Because in the end, a company like OpenAI does have a lot of power by providing everybody an AI tool to work with or to do a lot of different things with. So what does that say about differences of income and differences of power even more? So there's always a good and a bad side, right, to these questions.
I think we're very much still in the phase where it's totally an open race. In a lot of the things that we don't like about the world, like they already exist, right? There's already monopolies. There's already like huge companies who get most of their ad revenue and can kind of decide what the internet looks like. And for me, the opportunity in this technology change that we're just experiencing is really that with the technology shift can come a power shift. Of course, if OpenAI and Google and Meta play it well, then it will keep all the power. But right now, everything is changing so quickly that nobody knows if there's small companies or small like open source like teams that can come up with a good solution and take some of the power back. And I think that's also like where our responsibility lies to like kind of educate everybody, like give everybody the information they need to know to discuss regulations, to protest if one of the big companies wants to do something that we don't think is good, and also to come up with our own ideas. Like even in the media space, there might be a gap somewhere that nobody is looking at right now where we can take something back from Google and Meta just because everything at the moment is shifting around.
Yeah, it's very present, and we can keep on talking about it for hours, I think, but sadly our panel has come to an end. But we can just keep on striving for innovation. This is so badly placed, but here is a QR code where you can also follow us on LinkedIn and our newsletter. Thank you guys so much. It was very interesting what you said, and a big thank you and a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks.